Turn it up.
I told you now.
Please.
You are worse than me.
Another year is ending. Shay, you dey whine.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the BabaKay podcast. And of course, you know, they call me BabaKay. And today's episode, I want to dive into something different from the usual trending topics that I usually, talk about. I usually talk about anything that is trending all over the social media space, entertainment, politics, name it. I talk about it all here on the BabaKay podcast. But today, I want to go, personal. Yeah. I feel like I've been doing this now for this should be my 5th episode if I'm correct, and I figured I need to get you guys to know more about BabaKay, who I am, why I'm here, and my fears, my challenges, and my struggles, the fights, and the things I've had to battle over the years to get to this very point where I am. And so today, I'm going to be talking about grief and fear, or maybe fear and grief. And I call them the twin shadows. Basically, that's the way I like to define fear and grief, And so for this topic today, I'm going to really dive into it personally because, I've had some experiences in life, that have shaped me to become who I am today. Okay? Now, you see, fear and grief are two emotions that silently shape, how we live. They control how we move, who we trust, and whether we try again or whether life breaks us. And so today I'm going to explore them, not just from a textbook, from my own life. You see, now let's talk about fear. Now, everyone at some point has something they fear. You have something you are afraid of. Some are afraid of heights. Some are afraid of water, the ocean. Some are afraid of fire. Some are afraid of, getting into a new relationship. We all have things that we're, afraid of, or something that we fear. And sometimes, like that popular saying that sometimes what you fear most comes to you. Now, there's really no proof to ascertain that statement, but if you live through life, you will find out that somehow that statement is true. Sometimes what you fear most comes to you. So I'm going to give you a little backstory. Sometime in 1995, I lost my great-granddad. My great-grandfather passed in 1995, and my dad at that time was the eldest son of his own father, and my grandfather, who was still alive, was very old at that time. So the responsibility of burying my great-grandfather fell on my dad as the first son. Now, my dad had managed to walk over the years to get a lot of money to, send us to school. And while we're still in school, he was still managing to run his own personal business until his great-grandfather died. Until his grandfather, who at that time was my great-grandfather, passed. And so my dad gathered everything, every resources he had. And of course, if you in Nigerian, you will know that funeral and burial ceremonies are a big deal, especially if you are from the Igbo speaking part of Nigeria. Now, and when I mean Igbo, I mean not necessarily the hardcore Igbo, because I know some people refer to people from the Igbo speaking community from Delta State. They like to say they are not really Igbo, but then that's where I'm from. I'm from Delta State. And so at that time, my dad, put all his life investment into burying his grandfather. And through the whole ceremony, the funeral and everything, he was spending, and eventually we buried the man, and we had to come back to Lagos. And at that time, I saw my father struggle. He struggled to make money again. He struggled to feed us at that time. And from that time, I had this fear that, God, I hope this is not going to be my life someday. Maybe when my grandfather passes on, or when my dad passes on, and I have to spend all the money I have, or spend money, I'll come back and struggle, to start all over again. That has always been my fear. And at that same time, the fear of losing a loved one was also another fear, because I really didn't know how to deal with it at that time. So growing up, I'd always had this fear of losing a loved one, or now being the one responsible to bury that loved one. And fast forward to many years later, in 2021, my dad passed. And it was a very, 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 very difficult year for me. Now, before my dad passed, he had this illness he was battling with, and so we've taken him in and out of hospitals, medical treatments, seen a couple of doctors who have diagnosed him, said a couple of things, what we should do, what he should avoid, and we kept on doing all those things. And the more we were doing them, he wasn't even getting better. And so we're just watching every day go by, just trusting that he would get better. And so September 3rd, 2021, I woke up that morning and there was this airy feeling I was just having, something was not just right, I couldn't shake it off, because I really didn't know what was going on. But that feeling, you just know something is not right. I called everybody I know. Everybody was okay. Even my dad was okay at that time. But the vibration I was getting was off. I was sad. I was moody. I was, I kept to myself. My wife tried to cheer me up. Nothing, absolutely nothing was working that day. And so around 9 p.m. September 3rd, that same day, I just decided to speak to my dad. So I picked my phone and I called my dad. My family, my mom and my dad lives in Lagos. So I called my dad and just to check up on him and know how he's doing. And I said, Dad, how you doing? He said, I'm fine. I said, are you sure? He said, I'm fine. I said, just hang in there. I know I was supposed to come and see you earlier in the week, but I got caught up in work. But tomorrow, and that day was on a Friday, I said, tomorrow, Saturday, as early as 5 a.m., I'm going to leave my house and I'll come and see you. He said, no problem. And so I just told him, have you taken your medication? He said, yes. Did you eat tonight? He said, yes. So I said, okay, give the phone to Mom. And so I spoke to my mom. I said to her, are you sure he's taking his drug? My mom said, yes, he's okay. He's fine. He's really okay. Unlike every other day where he's uneasy with the whole illness, but today he's really relaxed. And I said, okay. I just told him that I'll be there tomorrow, very early tomorrow morning. And I dropped the call. And so I and my wife went to bed that night and we slept. And sometime around 4:30 a.m. my phone rang. That was Saturday morning. And my phone rang. That ringtone woke me out of my deep sleep. Even as I was sleeping all through the night, I still couldn't shake it off. But that phone call woke me up, so I jerked. I woke up, I picked up my phone. And when I picked up the phone, it was my younger sister who was calling. And the moment I saw the caller ID, that's my younger sister. Her name is Blessing. Something just said, this call is not going to be a good call. this call is not going to be a good call. But eventually I did pick the call, and I picked the call, and I heard that soft crying voice with pain, anguish, saying, "Kingsley." That's the name they call me at home. "Daddy, don't die. Daddy, don't die." I broke into pieces. I broke into a million pieces. Now, at that point, so many things were going through my head. Now, don't forget, I mentioned earlier that one of the fears I've always had, or one of the fear I've always had, is the fear of losing a loved one. And I had that fear from 1995. Now, eventually in 2021, several years later, not to say that I've not lost a lot of people along that time, but not close to me as my own father. So that fear that I've always nursed of losing a loved one just happened that day. And I kept on saying, why? And at that point, of course, I am the only son of my father. I have 3 sisters. I'm the eldest son, the only son. And so automatically the responsibility of burying my father is on my shoulders. And so I have to take up that responsibility. Now, taking up the responsibility wasn't the worry for me. It was the fact that I had lost my father. And even after taking that responsibility, the fear of now having to spend so much to bury him, and now coming back to suffer the same fate that my father suffered in 1995 after he buried his grandfather. It was staring me in the face, and it's about to happen. And so as I screamed, "Oh God, why?" my wife woke up and said, "Babe, what is it?" I said, "My dad is dead." And my wife said, "Oh Jesus." Now, don't forget that what I'm talking about today is fear and grief. Immediately, grief kicked in. Now, my wife was being sympathetic with me, trying to show love, care, and attention because her husband just lost his father. But rather clinging to my wife, I responded in a way that even myself couldn't believe. I screamed at my wife, "Don't hold me. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear anything." Now, if you were in that room with us that morning, you would think my wife was the one who killed my dad. But no. Grief had set in at that time. I just got dressed, and my wife said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to my father's house to go and see him. I need to go and see. I need to start making plans. He's dead. He's gone." And my wife said, "Okay, let me dress up and follow." I said, "Don't follow me. Just stay back." And so I dashed out of the house. And as I was going, it was like I heard a voice telling me, "What are you doing? Why are you behaving like your wife is the one who killed your father? She's trying to connect. She's trying to be sympathetic. She knows you just lost a loved one. What's going on with you?" And so I stopped and I went back home. Went into the house, held my wife, and I apologized. I said, "I'm sorry. I guess it's just the grief." And so I told her, "Get dressed, let's go." And as we were driving down, as we were going down to my parents' place, my eyes filled with tears. A lot of things were going through my head. It was real. Grief and the fear that I've always had was real. And eventually we got to my father's compound, somewhere before Agbara. Of course, if you are very familiar with Lagos, you will know where Agbara is. Just before Agbara. As we're walking into the compound, people were already gathered. Those that were crying, and walked in, saw my mom. My mom is a very strong woman. How she managed to hold it together that day, I still can't tell, because everybody was crying. She just stood there. I guess it was shock, because all through that period she didn't cry. She was just there. And one thing was that all through the time that my dad was sick, my mom was by his side every single moment, because my dad couldn't do anything by himself at that time. My mom was the one making sure she had to bathe him, feed him, clothe him, do a lot of things. My dad was a very agile man, very, very active man. Sickness just made him inactive. And my mom was there all the way. So having to see my mom lose the man that she has been with for almost 60 years of her life, and see how composed she was even at that moment of his death. I don't know how she did it, but I had a son. My eyes was filled with tears already. So I walked into the room where he was laid on the bed, and I told everybody, please step outside. And so everybody stepped outside. I was just the only one alone with my father's dead body on the bed. I sat by him, held his hand. His hands were cold, freezing cold. I still remember that day. And I kept on saying, Daddy, why? Why now? You could have waited. You know I'm not prepared for this right now. There's a whole lot more I needed to do for you. And now, the pain was that at that time, there were a whole lot of things I needed to do for my father that I had not done, but life is not just fair. Sometimes you want to do a lot of things, but life doesn't just come at you the way you expect. So I couldn't do those things, but having to see him dead now, I feel unachieved. And I held his hand and I kept on saying, come back. Please come back. But he was gone from this earth. His lifeless body was just lying there. My wife came into the room. The moment I saw my wife again, I broke down in tears. She held me, baby. Sorry. She was consoling me. The more she was consoling me, the tears kept on rolling uncontrollably. I could not hold back those tears. The pain in my heart, the grief, the anguish, the anger. Now I didn't even know who to transfer the anger to. If I'm angry at life, angry at the situation, angry at the doctors who misdiagnosed him, so many things to be angry about. But my dad was gone. And so immediately I started making arrangements to see how we could take his body to the mortuary. And families started suggesting, no, we can't put his body in the mortuary here in Lagos. We have to send his body back to the village today so that they take him to the mortuary in the village. I called, that's Loot. They got an ambulance. The ambulance came down to my father's compound, and everybody saw us. They walked into the room. The moment they lifted him from the bed and put him into that body bag, it was another whole level of grief, because at that moment he's never coming back. The only thing we have left are just memories. And my three sisters broke down. I saw my mom, she could barely cry because she did not even know how to express the pain or the emotions she was having at that time. And they zipped the body back, put him into the ambulance, and off they drove down, headed towards Asaba. And the process for the funeral, the burial rites and everything started. I was spending a lot of money, and as I was spending, my wife was advising me, babe, I know you have to bury your father, but don't forget, we have our own responsibilities. And what my wife was saying to me at that time was not making sense to me, because in my head, I have to bury my dad. And she said, I know, but we have a life after you bury him. If you spend all your savings, and the funny thing is that the villagers, the community, were demanding a whole lot to bury him. Left to me, I would have buried my dad here in Lagos, but you know how tradition is. They will always request that you bring the body back home and bury him. And so we got down to the village, and I spent everything I have, everything I had, to bury my dad. And a few weeks later, I got back to Lagos. I struggled. Now, between 2021 to 2023, I struggled to make ends meet. So it was like my father's experience, which I saw him go through in 1995, was happening to me again, which is the fear that I've always had. That fear that I've always had. So what I feared most finally came to me, and I didn't know how to deal with grief at that moment. So from 2021 to 2023, I was struggling with grief. I couldn't do anything productive. There was no day that went by that the thought of my father did not cross my head. I was grieving. My wife was complaining to everybody that she doesn't know what's happening to her husband, because I was not talking to my wife. I wasn't communicating to her. I was lost in grief for 2 to 3 years. Now, I'm using my experience to tell you what grief and fear can do, what they can do. Sometimes it's the fear of failure, the fear of poverty, the fear of not even being enough for yourself. Those are the things that we fear. We don't see it from that angle. And so we have to look for a way to heal from grief, and also look for a way to deal with fear. We have to deal with these things. Remember, vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. Let's talk about therapy. And funny enough, therapy is not something we normally do here in this part of the country, because if I had gone to therapy, I'm sure I would have dealt with the grief sooner than expected. But because we do not even do those kind of things over here, it was something I held on to for almost 3 years. Almost 3 years. If you're being hurt, I see you. If you're afraid, I hear you. And if you're grieving, you are not alone. This is BabaKay, and this is the Batterbox podcast. Let's keep this conversation going. Follow us on all our social media platforms, and also share your thoughts. Let us know how you're healing. And maybe you want to share your own experiences with me. You can always send us a message, and be certain that I will reply you. Until next episode, remember, the matter does not matter until it begins to matter. I'm signing out.
Bata bata, bata bata, bata.